negotiation has been going on for, I believe, 8 years. It stalled under the Trump administration. And so I really consider this an historic achievement, and it shows that multilateral collaboration can be successful.
Let's get more on this now from Quentin Parrinello. He's a senior policy officer on tax justice and inequalities at OXFAM. Good to have you on the program with us. First off, how likely do you think this tax plan will be approved, given that we might see opposition from Ireland and possibly the U.S.?
I think that the big advantage with this measure is that it's perfectly applicable unilaterally. And the US has already announced that whatever is the outcome of the negotiation at the G20 and in the OECD, they will adopt it. They will try to adopt it unilaterally. And the fact that Ireland is opposing right now means that Ireland is likely to be the biggest loser, because the way the minimum tax works is that if one country refuses to top up its tax rate to the minimum level, the other countries can tax the difference. So let's say a French company operating in Ireland, France would be able to tax the difference. So the multinational company would have no incentive whatsoever. It would just be Ireland losing money.
You know, we've been talking about, it seems like for years, these major tech companies like Google and Amazon raking in billions of dollars in profits, but not paying anything in taxes or hardly anything. What does this mean for these tech giants if this plan is approved?
So it's not only about tech giants, it's about multinational as a whole. And applying a minimum tax on multinational is an effective way to tackle tax avoidance by large multinationals. So that's a step forward, right? But the design in the minimum tax that was approved between the G7 nations is still concerning for OXFAM, because there are some flaws that could mean multinationals could still be able to avoid taxes at large scale. First of all, the rate is quite low. It's still not as much different as some of the rates used by tax havens. There's nothing about exemptions yet, and a lot of countries are pushing for exemptions within the agreement. And finally, and I think the most important, they didn't speak about who will get the revenues from the minimum tax. And G7 countries are pushing for the revenues to be collected by rich countries, by G7 countries, essentially. And the negotiations at OECD level are between 140 countries, and a large number of developing countries are now claiming that the revenues should be theirs as well. So there's a huge fairness aspect as well, not to overlook in these negotiations.
So it sounds like there's still quite a few kinks to work out. But what kind of measures could we likely see to make sure that these multinationals pay taxes where they operate?
So this is two aspects are being discussed at the OECD. First of all, that's this minimum tax, that the floor, a floor minimum level of taxes paid by multinational, and second of all, a number of taxes that would be collected in market countries. Today, large digital companies are able to operate in a number of countries without actually paying taxes. Google, Apple in European countries, for instance. And part of the deal at the OECD and part of the deal being discussed at the G7 this weekend was about letting European countries claim some taxing rights in these countries.
In the U.S., at least, big tech has a lot of influence when it comes to politics. Do you think that we'll see big tech fight back to try to continue to not pay hefty taxes?
I think you have two kind of oppositions. You have oppositions from lobbyists from the old world, so to speak, and they already managed to scale back the ambition, because a couple of months ago, the ambition pushed by the US administration was a 21% minimum effective tax rate. And the agreement that was struck in the G7 summit last weekend was a 15% rate. So you can see that they're having influence already, right? But you can also see a number of companies that are getting on board because they know this is happening, and they better just get on board and support a tax and know that their responsibility as companies is also to pay tax where they operate. And you were quoting Janet Yellen in the beginning of the report you were making, and she had this very important word saying that tax competition, if it's a lose-lose game, right? We need the tax revenues to fund infrastructure. We need the tax revenues to fund education and health, so that we have workers that have the better skills to have infrastructures, and that's also good for companies. So a number of companies are actually getting on board because they know eventually that will serve them as well.
All right, Quentin Parrinello, thank you so much.